Morning.
Good morning, Father.
To any of our visitors and guests, welcome to Immaculate Heart of Mary. Father Tom Miller, the pastor, Deacon Chris, and I are delighted to have you with us. And for all of us, if you grew up in the St. Louis area in the days before cable and satellite dishes and everything, you had your three main TV networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, 2, 4, and 5. Then there was Channel 30, Channel 9, and Channel 11. And depending on how close you lived to the city, some of those stations came in well, and some of them didn't come in very well at all. My favorite station growing up was Channel 11. They had cartoons on in the morning before school. They'd have cartoons on in the morning after school. And then on Sundays, if you remember, they always ran like a series of movies. They'd edit it for TV, and they'd often have a theme. So one weekend it would be a whole bunch of Abbott and Costello movies. They made a lot. They'd play them back to back. Or the old Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movies, where Tarzan versus this or Tarzan and that. I can remember some of the car racing movies of the 70s, like, what was it, Dirty Mary and Crazy Larry with Peter Fonda and movies like that. And of course they would try to draw you in because they didn't want you watching the main network, sports or whatever was on. One of the things they really loved playing on Channel 11, and if you didn't grow up in the St. Louis area, hopefully you had a channel like this where you grew up, they liked playing Westerns a lot on Sundays. And if I would have prepped Walter earlier, I could have had him get his harmonica out and do some of the stuff from the spaghetti Westerns, because that music is, so you don't need to do it anyway, Walter. It's distinct. And if you remember in the spaghetti Westerns, especially Clint Eastwood, he had 3 of them in a row where he played the same character. We don't know the man's name. He's called The Man with No Name. It was Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More, and then The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, one of my favorite Westerns. And in that movie, in that spaghetti Westerns, he doesn't say too many words. What do? They show a lot of scenery and a lot of close-ups of his face. In particular, his eyes and that look of determination. Of course, he was a gunslinger, and he was fast on his draw and everything, and he had a particular brand of justice that he was wielding in most of those movies, although in The Good and Bad and the Ugly, he was just looking for treasure. There was 3 of them looking for treasure. But there was always that pause when there would be some altercation, and they'd zero in on his face, and you knew something was going to happen. I imagine that type of scene when we get to the gospel today. Not that Jesus is going to whip out a 6-shooter and start shooting people. That he's not going to do. He just told the people of Nazareth, his hometown, that he's come to proclaim a year of favor from the Lord, to announce liberty to the captives, mercy. And initially, as we hear, the gospel picks right up. They're amazed at the words that come from his mouth. Hey, this is our boy come home. He's speaking well. But underneath that current of praise is murmuring. People going, well, isn't this the son of Joseph? And that is meant as a dismissive comment. Who does Jesus think he is? We know Jesus. Now, Jesus has a choice at that moment. And I think at that moment, if it was one of these movies, you'd look at his face, and he'd be looking at everybody in the synagogue, probably a lot less people than here today. And what does he choose to magnify? He doesn't address the praise, because some of the people are praising him. He goes after the people who are dismissing him. And he makes bold statements. Surely you'll quote to me, physician, cure thyself. Or you'll ask, why don't you work the miracles here that we heard you worked in Capernaum? So he's already setting the stage. And when they start hearing this, they're not smiling anymore. Even the people who were praising him are beginning to wonder where he's going next. He doesn't do it with anger, but he does it with an immense amount of determination and directness. He says, during the time of Elijah, there were many people who were starving and hungry. Who did God send Elijah to? A pagan, the widow of Zarephath in Sidon. She's not a true believer. She doesn't praise the one God. She is an unbeliever. And they hear that, and they're getting agitated and angry with Jesus, because they know exactly what he's saying to them, just like all of you unbelievers. That's why God isn't going to send a messenger to you, even though he's right in front of you. And then he goes on to pick another example. Naaman the Syrian, another pagan, unbeliever. Many people in Israel, many pious Jews had leprosy. Who did God send Elisha to? Naaman the Syrian. Now can you imagine on a Sunday morning if I kicked you all off and you rose up and said, hey, let's shut him up. Out in the backfield, somebody's got a gun, we're going to silence him. Because that is the reaction of the crowd at Nazareth. Shut Jesus up. And he's unafraid. He did that deliberately, not to anger them, but to try to shatter their stubbornness. Because if there's one thing we have as human beings, boy, we've got a lot of stubbornnness. Lays right there underneath the surface, and he tries to shatter that, and they reject it. I can't imagine what the feeling was, because they rise up, push him out the door, and they're going to take him to the place where they put people to death. Over the hill, in the pit, and down come the rocks. And Jesus says all that unafraid. Because he wants their conversion. He wants to shake them out of their stubbornness. But it's a moment where they say no to him. And they bring him to the very edge, where the next step would be death, and Jesus passes through their midst. In all of this, Jesus Christ is unafraid. He doesn't have a panic mode. If you all dragged me back there, I'd be panicking. I hope I could run across the field. Maybe I can, I don't have to be faster than all of you, just enough. But no panic for Jesus Christ. And you and I need to remember that about our Savior. We spend a lot of time as priests and deacons and bishops talking about the gentler side of Jesus, because he has a very gentle side. He is patient, he is merciful, he is forgiving, he wants people to be reconciled. All the things we have in that second reading, that is the mature fruit of love that Jesus Christ embodies. And Paul is trying to convey to the Corinthians, if you want to love like Jesus, be like this. We use it at weddings a lot, but it really has nothing to do with weddings. It has a lot more to do with Christian maturity. And we hope that, the new bride and groom will embrace that loving maturity that the reading talks about. But it's really for all of us that you and I want to have a mature love like that. But we want to look at Christ today and see his strength and his determination and his courage. Because you and I, we get afraid. We have panic moments. And we want to learn to trust in Jesus Christ and know his power and his strength. We don't want to ever forget, and I don't think we will because we tend to emphasize the gentler side of Jesus a lot, but the man's unafraid. He probably knew how they were going to react to him when he used those two examples. They weren't going to say, you're right, I guess we really should be more open to you and have faith. But he calls out their lack of faith. And we see him do that numerous times in the gospel. This is just one instance. What you and I want to know is the power of Jesus Christ that makes him unafraid of any person. Makes him unafraid of any evil spirits. In fact, every time we see a possession in the Gospels, who's afraid? They are, not him. Even when there's bad weather, Jesus isn't bothered by it. We just heard in the reading on weekdays, they're having a storm, and they are saying, hey, aren't you concerned that we're going to perish? And he rebukes the storm, and it's gone. And they are puzzled. Who is this? And you and I today, as we approach the Lord at this altar, we want to know his strength and his power. And we want to call on it the next time we feel afraid or we are tempted to panic. Our greatest example of that in the church is the martyrs. There are people who are facing death, and God gives them a peace and a courage that boggles the world. And we don't have to be on the point of martyrdom just to receive that grace. We can receive it in our daily lives. But remember, Jesus' heart and intention is always to change our hearts, to bring about conversion. He doesn't want rejection in Nazareth. He's not afraid of it. He doesn't want to be threatened with death, but he's not afraid of it. He wants to bring those people to conversion. And if he can take the gentle approach with you and I, he'll do that. And if you need him to take the strong approach, you watch out, you know. And so we're here today because we want to say yes to Jesus Christ. We want him to shake us out of any of our stubbornness of heart. And above all, we want to turn to him to be our strength and our courage.